Hi, this is Bob Perkins with AA-ISP's Inside Sales Studio. I'm so pleased to have Dave Chwalik with us today. Hi, Dave.
Hey, Bob. My pleasure to be here.
I hope you enjoy this episode. We're going to talk about some best practices around building an inside sales organization. And Dave, you've been 15 to 20 years in inside sales and inside sales leadership. I know you had your start in copier sales when back then it was heavy field-based. We've seen such a change. You've been with Pearson for 15 years. Most recently, you were with Change Healthcare, so you have a huge background in both seeing sales from a field base and an inside sales base. So it's great to have you. We're going to tap into some of your knowledge and experience. Back in 2012, Dave, you were recognized with the AA-ISP's Culture Award, which recognizes organizations for driving and building an outstanding culture. So I'd like to talk to you about that a little bit. Your experience, I think, specifically at Pearson, where you really helped change the culture. So could you give us some tips on what you did and share with the audience some things that maybe they can think about through culture?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's interesting is I was in the field at Pearson and was asked to assume at the time, the regional VP of inside sales role without having any inside sales experience. And I don't know if you recall this, Bob, but I called you in early 2006. I saw your name and AISP affiliation on the web. I called you. You picked up right away. We had a great first conversation that I think really began to lay the foundation for what I needed to learn with regard to inside sales and the profession of inside sales. I think there are 6 core elements to a sales culture that really is aligned to a high-performing sales team. And those 6 are accountability, transparency, collaboration, achievement, recognition, and fun. And that cultural spirit really begins, or at least is introduced to candidates before they're even hired, so that they are aware of what kind of sales culture they may be entering. And I think it's important to have those candidates introduced to that culture in a number of different ways, including interacting with as many individuals as possible, including senior sales reps, different kinds of managers, and certainly as a VP of inside sales.
And sales culture really is something you can't just talk about it, right? It's got to be lived out, and then you can't hide it either. So if the culture is sort of weak, where you mentioned some good things, recognition, fun, achievement, if those things aren't present, candidates are going to know that when they talk to past employees. Is that correct?
Without a doubt. And I'm a big believer that as a tenured leader, sales leader, you can detect relatively early on with regard to interaction with a candidate if that candidate is going to be a good fit. Sure. I put a premium, however, on the candidate confirming in his or her own mind that this company is a good fit for me. And you do that with, as you alluded to, a number of different interactions for that candidate with different personnel within that company.
And I've been a big believer in exactly what you said. It's got to be a really good fit both ways. In fact, one of the things I've done in the past is when I'm interested in a candidate after the interview process, I encourage that candidate to come and spend a day with our team. That's being open, being transparent, talk to the other reps, ask them what they like about this company.
Well, without a doubt. And I think 2 items are hypercritical with regard to that. Indeed, I think there should be, as I mentioned before, several interactions with as many people as possible, because that's, I think, going to be a validation within the candidate's own mind that indeed this is going to be a good fit for me, or maybe not. Yeah. And inherent in that, as a sales leader, you can get feedback from other folks with whom that candidate has interacted, so that you can validate that this person indeed is going to be a good fit. Let's face it, there are no guarantees with regard to the hiring process, but you can minimize that risk with doing those kinds of interactions, coupled with different kinds of experiential activities in that interviewing process, whereby they may be involving role plays, creating a sales plan based on some scenarios. I think the more of that type of involvement and engagement, you're going to minimize that risk.
Well, Dave, we're gonna switch gears in just a minute to talk more about recruiting, right? So I want to pick your brain on some of those things you said. But before we go there, you had mentioned a couple things. You talked about recognition and fun, which I think both of those are just critical. Can you talk a little bit about recognition and maybe some of the things you've done in the past around recognition?
Sure. I think they can be as standard as recognizing rep of the quarter, rep of the year with regard to percentage increase, sales increase. You have the perpetual plaque set up in a visible area. But I also think an interesting award is, and this is viewed by most of the reps as the highest value award, and that is being recognized by your peers.
Right.
So one of the things I instituted is a top performing rep, a top contributor award that is only nominated and voted by the sales reps themselves.
Fantastic. I love that. That's a great tip, viewers out there. Peer recognition, peer nomination is fantastic. Talk to us about fun. You know, how do you, I mean, I've known you for years. You're a fun guy. Does that spill over to the team, and what does that look like?
Without a doubt, and again, that reinforces that type of sales culture for which you're striving. And you do some certain things that can be simple, and one is tied to recognition, actually, where you, within the rep setting, you're providing perhaps badges of achievement, and they could be conducted on a daily basis or a weekly basis. One thing that I like to do is there are any kinds of initiatives, I try to make them in a tight window, maybe a week-long, 2-week at a time clip. And within that rep space where everybody can see, you might have one example would be simple gold boxes. Okay. Lining up, maybe representative of a close. And maybe inside that box could be something that would be a small tchotchke, a $2 bill, something a little bit fun. But I think there's residual value when you see a line of gold boxes, for example, at the top of a cube, and you can compare how all the reps are doing just with that quick, tangible hit.
This reminds me of in high school football, we used to get the stars on the helmet.
Yeah, that's exactly.
And I remember looking up to the person, they had 30 stars on the helmet. I want to get 35, you know, so that's great. That's fantastic. So let's go ahead. You know, the AA-ISP, as you know, has done, we do annual research on top challenges. Time and time again, recruiting and hiring has come up as in the top 2 challenges year over year. Our industry has seen so much growth that I think recruiting and hiring is a bit of a challenge. It's a stretch out there for a lot of leaders. I want to talk about that. And I also wanted to mention, I forgot to mention earlier, Dave, you've served on the AA-ISP Advisory Board. Right. As a member, and I know a lot of these challenges we've discussed as a board, so maybe you can draw on some of that experience. But let's talk about the basics of, you know, you're a new inside sales director, you got to add 20 people, maybe you have a team of 40 now and you're growing to 60, you got to do it in a year. Can you share some tips with the audience?
Sure. I think there are 2 critical elements here, one of which is ensuring you have the correct hiring profile. And that may vary depending upon whether you're more in a transactional type of a sale versus a more complex, longer sales cycle. But nonetheless, I do think that there are 4 or 5 core attributes that you're trying to validate during the interviewing process. One of which is validating that candidate in his or her DNA has that need to win. I think also what's important is validating thriving in a competitive environment, having a positive attitude. I think coachability is important, and for the candidate to demonstrate some natural curiosity. And you can validate those traits, whether it's behavioral-based questions and or role-playing and various experiential activities.
That's great. That curiosity, I remember interviewing Jill Comrath. Yeah. And I think in her book, she talks a little bit about a rep that's curious, they want to learn more. Expand on that a little bit, if you could.
Yeah, you know, one of the important ways a rep is successful, obviously, is learning about that customer and the pain points of what's going on in that customer's world. But the way you ascertain that is through questioning. And you're not scripted out with a series of questions and you're going through A through Z on your questioning. You're listening to the responses and just you have a natural knack to ask a follow-up question so that you have a deeper understanding of what's going on in that customer's world.
And during even an interview of a candidate, you can, I've seen some that they wait for your answer. They're not curious. They don't ask questions in an interview. But that candidate tell me a little bit more about this, Dave. When you make this type of sale, how long is the sales cycle? So they actually can be curious in an interview, right?
Yeah, and that curiosity in that interview, I think all good sales leaders want to see a candidate ask questions that, in a way make me black and blue. I want to be beaten up a little bit in a sales interview. I don't, I don't like to see the typical questions that are being asked by the candidates, such as, tell me a little bit about your training program. How long, what's the length of the interviewing process? I want to hear questions such as, Dave, tell me what's your advice to allow me to have a faster start so that I can be more effective in my role.
Sure.
I want to see more thoughtful, critical thinking type questions. And unfortunately, you may not get a lot of those types of questions from most of the candidates.
No, that's good. That's really good. Curiosity is one of those attributes. The need to win, I think, is huge. Any advice out there around the actual how to find a candidate? And I know we've heard a lot about doing LinkedIn. I know you and I were talking earlier about reverse LinkedIn, and I wasn't too familiar with that. But any tips around how to find a candidate?
Yeah, I think depending on the size of your company, you may have a talent acquisition group of folks within HR. Obviously, it's very important to partner with that group and definitely influence that team and in essence guide them with regard to the type of profile for which you're presenting, along with sourcing ideas. So I think there are three primary avenues to source, one of which is doing reverse searches on LinkedIn with regard to key characteristics that you can incorporate into the fields, along with any type of geographical information. And you could even zero in on tenure of candidates, whether you're maybe looking for somebody with 1 to 3 years of a sales experience, or maybe 1 year of inside sales experience. So reverse searches on LinkedIn is a primary avenue that I use frequently. Secondly, I like to use career centers. And more importantly, sales centers. Okay. The Sales Education Foundation, as you know, Bob, has reported that there are nearly 100 sales programs throughout the country. And one of the things that I would encourage any sales leader to do is zero in on area universities, look to see if there's any kind of a sales center, at minimum, partner with the marketing department at that particular university.
That's fantastic. In fact, Dave, I'll be heading to Texas in a few weeks. 3M, the company 3M, is putting on this consortium of about 80 colleges and universities that actually have selling degrees. Nice. It's amazing. That's developed over the last 10, 15 years. So viewers, there's colleges out there that are graduating kids in sales. I'm going to put a plug in also for, I'm going to just switch gears here a little bit on you. I'm going to put a plug in for developing women in sales, and women specifically in sales leadership. As you know, Dave, because you've been, I know you get approached all the time by recruiters, as I do, for mid to senior level inside sales leadership roles. And I think we have a shortage of women. The AA-ISP is supporting women developing into leadership roles. We support women sales pros, head by Lori Richardson. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
I am.
But just a quick comment on women, future women in inside sales leadership roles that you want to touch on.
Yeah, I think that's an important need that we have in our industry. And I think it's great that we're partnering with Lori along with the Sales Educational Foundation overall. But we definitely need to increase the number of women in leadership roles, and I think there are a number of ways to pursue those kinds of candidates. Some of the things that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, and I know in your past you've had many managers or directors reporting directly to you as a VP, and I know many of them were women. So that's fantastic.
Indeed. Yeah, indeed. One of the things I also want to point out with regard to sourcing, that's a good avenue, is to conduct an open house at your corporate facility. I've done that in a couple different ways, one of which centered on an open house with some introductory comments, and then a panel discussion with regard to different career tracks after you're successful in an inside sales role. And that then was followed up with a general Q&A. Another flavor of an open house is, again, having some type of introductory session and then transitioning immediately then into speed interviewing. Have multiple managers ready to go and 10, 15-minute interviews and just keep cycling through.
I learned this open house concept years ago from a fellow named Paul McCurra, who today works as VP of one of the VPs at Oracle Direct. He stressed the concept of finding passive candidates, all right? Candidates that aren't necessarily looking, and his own employees would reach out to a friend, hey, I know you're happy where you are, you're not looking, but come on to this open house. Hey, there's pizza, there's refreshments, that kind of concept.
That's a home run concept, because you'll find a lot of strong candidates that may not be in an active job search mode, but to reach out to them, invite them to an open house, and or just begin to establish a relationship with them. And over time, there could be the possibility that they'll be looking for a new opportunity.
That's great. Look, we're just about at the end of our time here for the interview. Dave, is there anything you'd like to leave with the viewers before we end the session?
I think positive attitude can, whether you're a sales rep, whether you're a sales manager, I think a positive attitude really is at the heart and soul of high performance. And we all are subjected to different kind of curveballs in our lives.
Quotas.
Yeah, indeed. I do think, though, that surround yourself with positive people, wake up in the morning, energized, and with a positive, optimistic attitude that you're going to make a difference and you're going to do well for that particular day.
Great closing point. Dave, you're one of those positive people. You've served our inside sales community. You've been recognized. You've been on our board. You've spoken at many of our conferences. In fact, I believe you'll be speaking at the Leadership Summit on the exempt versus non-exempt laws. What a great topic that'll be. So I want to thank you for everything you've done to give back to the inside sales community. And together we're helping take this profession to the next level. So have a great day. This is Bob Perkins signing off with Inside Sales Studio. Take care. Bye-bye.